In today's episode of the Loam Wolf MTB podcast, we are going to be diving deep into handlebar tuning, vibration, frequencies, vertical compliance, and what goes into the testing and product development with Ryan Fowler, RaceFace's product manager. Let's dive in. So we're here with Ryan, who is the product manager for RaceFace. We're going to be talking a little bit about handlebars. Tell us what's new and what you guys have right now.
Yeah, you bet. So we're bringing in 2 new bars for 2026 that we're pretty stoked on. The first is that little light guy you got there. That's the Era SL handlebar. So it's a flippable +6 or -6mm rise bar. It's the lightest 35mm bar in the market. So it's 170 grams, and it's really designed for that like downcountry rider who's like pushing their bike, still hitting features, but is like very weight conscious. The other guy is this big boy. This is the Atlas handlebar. It's been completely redesigned for 2026. Comes in 20, 40, and 55mm rise options, and this is the big guy. This is the DH bike bar, and it's got a ton of sick colors. One of them, silver, is mint. Yeah, that's kind of the new stuff for 2026. We're pretty stoked. Do you want to talk a bit about kind of why these are the 2 bars we're introducing? And
what I would really like to talk about,
more.
Handlebar compliance.
Let's do it.
The testing that you do, what goes into all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like through the presentation today, I mean, it kind of, my brain started spinning when you were talking about the cranks,
Yeah.
right? And primarily with the Era SL cranks, right? And all the little things, whether that was like the scuff guard or the bonded spin cert.
Spin cert, yeah.
Like, you know, like I regularly think about, and I think we all do, right? How expensive mountain bikes are.
Yeah.
And they talked about it yesterday at the Fox presentation about like, yeah, we're spending millions of dollars to R&D the 38, which is still a great selling fork, right?
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm just thinking about like, how expensive is it to do this crank project? How expensive is it to do all the time testing energy into handlebars, right?
Yeah.
Something that is almost like, in many people's opinion, is just like a given that comes on a bike.
Yep.
And then when people are like, why are bikes so expensive? And I think like, okay, well, a crank company spent millions of dollars to develop this crank. How much does a handlebars R&D, stem R&D, and all of a sudden you start adding up how expensive everything is. And I'm not trying to be an apologist for how expensive bikes are, because it's crazily expensive.
I agree. Yeah.
But like, it's just, sometimes you don't think about that.
Yeah.
You just see a complete bike and you're like, this whole bike costs that much. And you only think about the frame and not the engineering that goes into every little part of the bike.
Yeah.
So again, I think it would be really neat to talk about the sensors on the forearms, right? Like the test rigs, the machines, the numbers, and really get into that and what you have found are ideal places to be for a rider in terms of comfort.
For sure. Yeah, I think we could talk about it kind of in 2 parts. Maybe first is like the test stuff and like the test lab and the fixtures and all that stuff, and then we can talk about that development. I think developing a product in and of itself it's a feat, right? Like it's a lot of effort that goes into it, and I think the lucky thing that we're fortunate with for RaceFace is fundamentally components are rather simple in nature, right? In a way. And what that enables us to do is we actually have like, you know, engineers based in Burnaby in Canada where RaceFace, you know, we were from the shore, but our office based in Burnaby. A lot of those guys are laying stuff up like by hand. And the materials that go into those, you know, prototypes are kind of expensive, of course, and then getting them produced in large quantities can be expensive. But the benefit with the RaceFace stuff and really component development in general is that our engineers are so used to doing that stuff that they're doing it on the ground, and then they're actually going to Taiwan and working through that development process. So it can be pricey, but it's a little bit less expensive, of course, than developing a fork. Now, I think the testing process or that nailing that sort of sweet spot for compliance is the part that, to me, is probably one of the most interesting things that we did. And it wasn't even that it was that expensive. It was actually just really time consuming. So it took 5 years. And that 5-year process started from the thing that you're speaking to about the sensors on the forearms all the way through to like producing final prototypes. So we'll kind of start at the beginning. I'll try not to spend too long because it's a big process. And so we kind of started this whole thing back in 2019. We had folks like Jesse Melamed. We had Remy actually part of it as well. He and I were chatting about it. And we looked at a bunch of stuff for handlebar compliance. When we went into that project, it wasn't even about compliance in the first place. It was about what makes the best bar in general. It's materials, it's vibration transmissibility, it's frequency of materials and how that interacts with the muscles in a forearm. Like, it's so science. And then it comes down to like, you put accelerometers on forearms, you measure that stuff. So it was everything from like, we looked at all of the variables and then started eliminating them, if that makes sense. So the sensors on the forearms, that was based on the vibration transmissibility. So how much vibration is moving from a bar, which also had an accelerometer on it, into that accelerometer on the forearm. And what we kind of found with that is that vibration transmissibility is important, but it's not really something that you can actually control that much. And it is by nature actually naturally related to vertical compliance. So that's sort of the golden egg that we're going to get to in a second. The other one was the natural frequency of materials, which again, like aluminum as a material has a certain frequency when, you know, dinged and has a vibration in the same way that a carbon bar does. And that frequency differs between those two materials. Now, how that frequency plays with humans is sort of this interesting thing. And there's a good area and there's a really bad area. And the other thing is that that we kind of got to think about is that's also really hard to control. You can't change the makeup of aluminum as a fundamental material. It's aluminum. It exists. We use it because it's strong and it's light. So you can't change aluminum. But vibration, transmissibility, and frequency are both directly tied to compliance. That's what we found is that when you hit the compliance sweet spot, both of those things are in the right zone. So we focused all in on compliance.
Okay, so vibration
and frequency
are all, no matter the material, you're going for the same spot?
Yeah, essentially
but is it a different tone, for lack of a better word, like that you're feeling based on aluminum or carbon?
Yes, so like that tone differs. And I think what's important to understand there is that each of those materials has a different frequency or a different vibration. But like I said, it's not like you can really control that because it's so tied to the fundamental nature of that material. But what you can control is how much the bar flexes. And when the bar flexes, those numbers of not so much vibration transmissibility, but actually frequency, it kind of hits a good zone for humans. Like there is actually a good zone of vibration or of frequency rather, that's just good for our muscles. And luckily that ties really well with what we aim for compliance.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And this is maybe a tough question to answer. I hope it's not.
Yeah.
I know you guys want to sell more carbon bars. Well, I don't know. I'm assuming you want to sell more carbon bars because they're more expensive.
Whatever works for people.
But for a rider who suffers from, finger fatigue, arm pump, have you guys found definitively that one material is better for that?
I think that...
Like, I know compliance is great, you can get the GL Tune compliant bar in carbon and you can get it in aluminum, but just like from like a straight up answer, like, hey, someone walks into a bike shop and you're selling bars, I really suffer from this. Are you gonna sell them an alloy bar or a carbon bar?
I think I'm probably gonna sell them a carbon bar. And I don't just say that because it's more expensive, because aluminum bars are actually cheaper for us to make, right? And so that's why they're cheaper for a consumer. So we don't necessarily make a whole bunch more money because we sell you a more expensive bar.
Margin's the same.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. But with carbon, the way that you achieve flex profiles and compliance is a lot easier to control. It's actually really hard to make a compliant aluminum bar. With a carbon bar, that's made up of like 100 pieces of carbon and they're all paper thin. So you can move them to exactly where you want. You can change the angle, you can change how much resin you put in. It's actually easier to control compliance in a carbon bar, which means you can nail a number. As opposed to aluminum, you're trying to hit within a range of that number. So for me, I think a carbon bar is the ideal upgrade because you're gonna really get what a company is striving to nail as a target. And then if you just prefer aluminum simply because you're, maybe you're averse to carbon components, you're like the OG guy who runs only alloy on his bike, get the alloy bar. If that's for you, take it. But if you're looking to really solve arm pump and really solve that hand fatigue, I do think that carbon's the ideal upgrade. And actually, we've had people reach out to us on social, like in my DMs, in Sean's DMs, our other product marketing guy for Fox. We get DMs of like, hey, I rode an Aero bar and like, I have like arthritis in my hands and I haven't been able to ride a bike and I tried this bar and I can ride my bike again. And that's really sick for us to hear. And we pass that back to Fraser, who's the guy that made that bar, and Bjorn, the guy that made this bar. And they're like, man, that's sick. Like that makes us stoked. So yeah, I would say if you're shooting for that ideal upgrade, carbon is the way to go.
So essentially what you're saying is that the vertical compliance also mitigates vibration through the compliance of that.
Yeah, in a way. It's more that vibration is this thing that exists and it does have a bit of an impact on rider fatigue, but that rider fatigue is most controlled and affected by compliance. Vibration is sort of almost secondary in a way.
Okay.
And we've seen some manufacturers incorporate other materials into bars, fill them with foam
Like
or other
Vibracor stuff.
Exactly, like Vibracor. And what we found with that stuff is that it might have affected vibration transmissibility a little bit, but it didn't actually make the bars more comfortable, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because something can quiet down chatter and vibration, but still be stiff.
Exactly.
Vertically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because I mean, there are people who have, and I mean, I've ridden Vibracor bars. Like I said, because I've personally been in a Quest, because I have dealt with like arthritic fingers, I guess. I don't know at this point, right? And but I mean, there are people who swear by the Vibracor stuff, and believe that it really is truly helpful. So I don't know. Would Vibracor? I mean, have you experimented with putting any sorts of inserts inside these bars, of any of your bars?
We haven't, because when we were doing that testing, we tested some competitor bars with stuff in them. We tested Vibracor bars, and we tested bars that were at a similar flex profile to those, and we put blind testing, like black spray paint. You don't know what bar you're running, and they couldn't really tell the difference if the actual flex in the handlebar was the same. If that makes sense. So I do think that there's something to be said for finding a bar that works for you, and for different people that's different things, of course. And in some ways, like if you're coming from a stock OEM bar that comes, for lack of a better word, like off the shelf, or others.
Sorry to call Canyon.
No, it's good. We love Canyon.
But their bars are pretty rough.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Especially with those grips that they run.
Yeah. Now, if you upgrade from a stock OEM bar to really an upgrade bar from any manufacturer, it's going to feel better. And the hard part is like you don't really have the opportunity to test like 20 bars as a rider. So what we rely on is like trying to share the message in the clearest way that we can, making sure that shop staff have time on bars, and that when you walk into a shop, what's that person's preferred bar? We want that answer to be race face. And that's actually a big focus for us this year, is like, get in with the shops, get out with the homies, and like put them on bars. And like when they do, like I have buddies at Transition, at Pivot, at Trek, and whatever, and they ride them and they're like, damn. And if we can make that happen, I think we're just going to get more people on what they need.
No doubt. That's it's the demo program, right?
Yeah, dude, the demo program.
So I guess similar, but on the opposite side of the bar. Let's not talk inserts. There are grips, D3O. There are other brands. It's going to, I assume, be a similar result. We're talking, I guess, about like splitting hairs of like, oh yeah, sure, I guess you're going to get some of the vibration dampening or a little bit of squish.
Grips. Yeah, let's go.
But like, you're not getting a more compliant bar by doing that. Correct. So are you just putting a Band-Aid on the problem?
I wouldn't say you're putting a Band-Aid on the problem. It's like putting a pillow on a bed, right?
Yeah.
Like you're adding cushion. You're not, it's a bit of a, I wouldn't say it's a different thing to address the same problem. It's a different thing to address a slightly different problem. Like vertical compliance is controlled in a handlebar. Immediate comfort and cushion is controlled in the grip. Like, these are hard, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can get a grip that makes the initial impart of forces on a bar, or that like bottom out feeling have some cushion, you're winning. It's a bit of a different thing. I know I'm super picky on grips. Mm-hmm. And
grips like a tire, and this is like your fork.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Actually, that's a really good way to think about it, because you have that like 50 mil of cushion on your tire, and then your fork starts working.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good shout, actually.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Tires and forks.
Okay, so tell me what you like about grips, and thick versus thin.
Yeah, dude, I'm a thick grip boy all the way, for sure.
Do you have really big hands?
I don't, actually. I have like not the biggest hands. I mean, they're huge. No, no, I have a pretty medium-sized hand, but I feel like back in the day before I worked at Raceface, I used to run like ODI rows, like thick guys, right? Like chunky grips. And I think maybe that was because when I came into mountain biking, I was looking for comfort, and that was a place that I went because it's a really affordable upgrade.
Right.
And I was like, thick grips equals cushion, and I feel like I just got used to it in a way. And nowadays, when we developed like my favorite grip, and honestly, it's not biased, or at least biased it can be, is the Chester grip in 34.
Yeah.
We developed that grip, we sent prototypes out, we actually were so close to production, and we had seeded samples out, and I took, myself and a bunch of other people took grips, and we were like, I don't know if I would switch,
Yeah.
And so we went back to the design engineer and he changed a bunch of stuff and he made it better. He added additional rubber underneath the palm where you have that like main impact of force. The other thing that I think is interesting about that grip, and not just plug-in, because I think it's actually really cool, is that the inside sleeve of that, where normally you just have a plastic sleeve, plastic's hard. It's a hard material.
Yeah.
So we actually drilled holes in that sleeve so that when you're bottoming out on the bar, you're bottoming out on rubber. You're not bottoming out on plastic. So adding more depth to that rubber, that's why people love, what are they called? Like the slide-on grips or whatever. Like people,
there's no plastic sleeve.
Yeah, exactly. People come from BMX or what have you, or they're just love the feeling. It's just cush all the way.
Yeah.
And so if you can get close to that feeling, like it means we've kind of succeeded. So, but yeah, grips are really interesting. I think that there's some interesting development out there with incorporation of other materials, especially stuff that stiffens up under impact. We use some stuff in pads and shoes and things like that. And I think that there's a bit of an interesting thought process there, but to me, I think we've gotten really close to that kind of like slide-on feeling with the Chester grip, and I run those on all my bikes now.
Yeah, I mean, we love the Chesters. We sell them in our web store so much we like them.
Go.
But any chance there'll ever be a Chester slip-on? I feel like people aren't taking grips on and off all the time. Like, why don't we in mountain biking have slip-on grips?
Yeah,
like I think it's undeniable the comfort would be improved, right?
Yeah, I think in a way, yeah, and I think you know, if you can eliminate more of that plastic core or find a different way, you know, we've looked at some wild stuff. One thing that's come up in the past few years is just like an idea is, you know how like a Chinese finger trap works? How it's like pushed on, it's loose, and then you pull it, it's tight?
Yeah.
We were like, can we do something with that? Can we make like a webbing on the inside of a grip? But we haven't quite gotten there yet. And I don't know if it, I don't know if like it makes all that much sense, but a slip-on grip, I think like fundamentally we know that there's a bit of a market for it. Maybe is the answer. You know, when the original Chester grip way back in the day, it was a slip-on grip.
Yeah.
And then we know that people really liked it, so we kind of tried to take inspiration and get as close as we could to that feeling.
Yeah.
So can't say it's off the table, but lock-on grips, I think the biggest thing is it's just, people don't change grips all the time, but it just makes it easy for installation. That's the biggest thing.
Sure.
Easy on off, you know.
I mean, it's just, you're not changing grips all that often.
Yeah,
right?
I
so it's
know.
like between the, well, I remember doing like, was it hairspray was one? Or
Yeah,
air compressor?
hairspray, air compressor, like you use alcohol because it evaporates.
Yeah.
I remember being in the shop doing slip-on grips, dude. Yeah, it's not that hard. I 100% agree, but I think there's something with a lock-on grip that's just, it's just nice.
It is.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sure.
I especially when we were like traveling to events like this.
Dude,
like,
for sure.
boom,
You're swapping
on and off.
bars. You don't need to worry about getting the air compressor going and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe it's not off the table.
So in all of the testing studies that you've done, have you compared thick versus thin grips to see what that changes in terms of like, you know, if you're gripping something real tight and small and reaching for a lever versus like a really big stretched out palm reaching for a lever? Have you guys done any studies or tests on that?
We haven't done any studies and tests particularly on that, but it's a really interesting thing. And I think like the thing there is that, you know, I think it's so, right now, it's so based on personal preference. Yeah. It's just like, I'm a thin grip guy, I'm a thick grip guy, I'm a foam grip guy. Like, you just kind of know what you like. And I think being a brand, we don't ever want to tell people what's good for them in a way. We wanna find whatever we can to help make the best decision, but it comes down to personal preference a lot of the time. So we haven't looked specifically into exactly how, like, you know, the tighter you squeeze, the more your forearm is getting worked. But fundamentally, it's I don't want to say it's obvious, but if you're cranking on your grips, your forearm is going to get tired for sure. But yeah, it's a good question, and might be fun.
It is interesting.
Maybe we'll have to call you up and see if we can do something.
Yeah, dude, I would be totally into it. I think it'd be super fun. And does Greg ride your bars and grips?
No, Greg's on cast, man.
He is?
I mean, he's got to be on cast. But the rest of that team swapped over, and we know we saw Gracie rip this bar at Hardline. That was sick, and she seems pretty jazzed. And I talked to their team mechanics, and they said that their team's been pretty happy testing the bars. So we're stoked to hear that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, we're stoked.
Yeah, Greg Menard just drove by in a minivan and was sticking his tongue out at us.
Dude, the homie, that guy was, that guy got some orders in with the servers last night. It was sweet. Greg's a sick guy, man.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
So, cool, man. Well, thank you so much for the time.
Man.
I appreciate all the efforts and work you guys do to try to make riding more comfortable and safe, obviously. So
that's what we're here for.
Thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Reach out with any questions. And if you would be interested in a slip-on grip, let us know.
Let us know. And if you're at the shore, hit us up.
There
Let's
you
go for
go.
a rip.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Cheers.